Hello, Packers fans, wherever you may be. Welcome to another edition of the Pack Attack Cast for fans, from fans. And what we're going to do today is talk about the top five reasons that the Green Bay Packers Super Bowl hopes could fall short. Um, as an analyst, it's equally important for us to look at the upsides of our teams as well as our downsides. Try to figure out what could derail a successful Super Bowl run for, in this case, the Green Bay Packers. Before we get started, though, we're recording this right before the 4th of July, so I want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July. And also, please ask you, if you haven't already done so, give us a like on this video and a subscribe as we're trying to get to 3,000 before the start of training camp, which I will be at reporting for you. And also, we'd like to get to 5,000 before the start of the NFL season. And that only happens if you give us a subscribe. So we really appreciate that. And let's get on to our topic of today. The top 5 reasons the Packers Super Bowl hopes could fall short in 2025. So let's talk about some of the things that could derail this team, because I have a really strong feeling that this team is ready to take the next level, to jump to the next level and become a truly elite NFC team. They've been on the verge for the last 2 years, and there's been a couple things that have derailed that, but I think we're very close to getting where we need to be for the Green Bay Packers. But we also have to look at the things that could derail this optimism and get in the way of success. Any good GM or coach likes to take a third-party lens and look at their team and try to figure out what the problems are so they can avoid them before they become a problem. And a lot of these items are things that the Green Bay Packers can take steps to avoid, but they're things that we need to talk about. And I'm sure that the folks at Lambeau are talking about this on a regular basis so they don't have a problem in 2025. So number 5, for the reasons that the Packers might not make it to the Super Bowl, is the injury bug hits again. So while the Packers were generally healthy in 2024, we did see injuries impact in a big way. Some of the ways were obvious. For example, the impact of Jordan Love's injuries on the passing offense, and some of them were under the radar and they came out after the season. So let's take a look at some examples from 2024 that could pop their head up in some way in 2025. For example, Jordan Love was never healthy at 100% and this had a big impact on the season. Matt LaFleur is on record as saying Love had very limited mobility at times, and it really impacted the plays they could call for much of the season. For example, Jordan Love is very effective on bootlegs, but we didn't see a lot of that in 2024 because Jordan Love didn't have the speed and mobility to be effective on bootleg plays, and it would have just led him into the waiting arms of pass rushers. So this is a good example of how a injury, even though Jordan Love fought very hard to get onto the field as much as possible, he was never 100% healthy, and you could see how that impacted the passing game. Injuries were a big hidden impact on the pass rush, with both Kenny Clark and LVN having injuries for much of the season that impacted their ability to pass rush. For example, Kenny Clark had a toe injury. Now, some of you just say, toe injury, what's the big deal? But when we're talking about a monster of a man in Kenny Clark, the ability to push off on his toes, it has a big impact on how much force he can enact against the opponent. So there's no doubt that was a big factor. For LVN, he had a broken thumb for a lot of the season that really impacted his ability to use hands while he was trying to make pass rush moves. using hands and getting the appropriate leverage is a huge part of pass rush. So it really makes a lot of sense that LVN struggled, and a lot of people were saying, why isn't LVN on the field? Why isn't he getting as many attempts as we would like to see? Well, that was a key part of the reason. I could also talk about Jair Alexander's injuries, but what's the point? Jair Alexander being injured was the norm by the end of 2024. So that wasn't as big of an issue as a lot of people think. We also had injuries at wide receiver at critical moments. Both Romeo Doubs and Jayden Reed were knocked out in the key playoff loss. And having them on the field might have made a difference in that game. So injuries really come into play a lot in the NFL. Whether it's a injury that impacts a player for the whole season, like Kenny Clark, or having Romeo Doubs and Jayden Reed knocked out of that playoff game, really when the team needed them most, is a good example of how short-term injuries can have huge ramifications. You can also look at the playoff game against the Eagles, where we had offensive linemen knocked out of the game, and it had a huge impact against the team that had possibly the best pass rush in the NFL last year. It was absolutely the worst possible time to have the Packers have injuries on their offensive line. And while those weren't lingering injuries, they were a big part of how the Green Bay Packers lost that playoff game, if you look at the tape, because it wasn't the defense that lost the game against the Eagles. It was the inability of the offense to consistently produce yardage and touchdowns that caused the Green Bay Packers to lose the game against the Eagles. The Packers have mitigated this risk by being one of the deepest teams as far as talent, and they've only become deeper at key positions in 2025 via free agency in the drafts. So hopefully, while no team can keep the injury bug at bay 100%, hopefully the Green Bay Packers are in a position to mitigate that risk in 2025. Next up, number 4, the Packers cannot stop their drops. The Packers had 33 drop passes in 2024 and were third in the league in drops. How many of those drops were first downs that kept drives moving or big plays that never happened? Far too many. And it wasn't just the drops, it's when it happened. If you go back and look at the cut-ups, so many of those drops happened at key moments of the game where Jordan Love needed the receivers to make a play, to keep a drive moving, to get a first down, to possibly pop open a big touchdown play. There were so many situations where the Green Bay Packers were severely limited on offense because of these drops. And it's not just that initial drop that is the problem. If you're Jordan Love and you're trying to make big plays to win a playoff game, and there's a player that's open, but they just dropped the ball 2 or 3 plays ago, it's really hard for the quarterback to have that amnesia and not try to find a better target for that play instead of just throwing the ball out as quickly as possible to the open receiver. So how many times did Jordan Love maybe hold on to the ball too long because he was worried about those pass drops? We're never going to know. I think it's safe to say, looking at the tape for 2024, that drops cost this team maybe 2 or 3 wins in 2024. Now that happens to all teams. No team can avoid drops, but you really have to mitigate them, not just mitigate drops, but mitigate drops at key moments in games. And that's really where the Green Bay Packers need to improve in 2025. How are they going to address this? They're going to address it in training camp and practice. If they can't fix this issue in training camp and practice, the Packers are not going to make it to the Super Bowl. There's plenty of talent at wide receiver, but they have to be able to catch the ball consistently. And that goes up and down the roster. There were players that had problems with drops. Jayden Reed and Dontavian Wicks led the league in drops in 2024. Now, Dontavian Wicks you could argue he was not an elite receiver, but Jayden Reed dropping the ball as many times as he did was a big problem for the Packers. You look at the Eagles in 2024, they had 7 drops in the whole season. And if the Packers can get somewhere between the Eagles' 7 drops, which is very unusual, and the 33 that they had, maybe get their drops down to like 20 or 22 drops, that would be a big improvement, and that could make a difference on getting the Green Bay Packers to the Super Bowl. But if the Packers can't fix their drop problems, they will not make it to the Super Bowl in 2025. I stand by that. That's something that they really need to work on at a much higher level in 2025. Next up, number 3, the Packers can't continue to evolve as players and play callers. At the end of 2023, the Packers had one of the most dynamic big play offenses in the league, and they were just a defensive stop away from the Super Bowl against the 49ers. In 2023, no team wanted to face the Packers passing offense because in the playoffs, it was so red hot. They were making big plays. They were completing first downs at a very high level through the passing attack, and that was amazing. But they didn't have the defense to get to the Super Bowl in 2023. You look at 2024, the Packers had a top 4 running game that could take over games, and they had a top 6 defense based on DVOA in 2024. But what was missing? The big passing plays were consistently missing in this offense. When they needed a big pass play in 2024, it did not happen. In 2023, they were getting those big pass plays. So what the Green Bay Packers have to do as players and as play callers on offense and defense, they need to take both versions of the team from 2023 with the great passing offense and 2024 with the great rushing offense and great defense and combine them into something special and unique. The team in 2025 just needs to get that spark and big play potential that they had in 2023 to become an elite offense that is unstoppable. So if the Packers can't combine these 2 play styles into one great play style for 2025, they will not make the Super Bowl in 2025. Number 2 on my list, and this is very important, the Packers need to grow up. And if they can't grow up, they're not going to get to the Super Bowl in 2025. What do I mean by this is we've heard from the last 2 years that the Green Bay Packers are the youngest team to make the playoffs. They have so much young talent. They have so much upside. But the Packers need to feel urgency to win a title and grow up as a group. This team needs to grow together and grow up and become not the youngest team in the playoffs, but the best team in the playoffs. And that's the key distinction. We can no longer just say, well, we didn't win, but we're the youngest team in the playoffs. No, we have to say the Green Bay Packers are the best team in the playoffs, period. This is what great teams do. They take their play to the highest level and become the best. Not the best youngest team, but the best team, period. And that's what the Green Bay Packers need to do in 2025 if they want to make the Super Bowl. Number 1 on my list is if the Green Bay Packers continue to lose to the NFC North, they will not make it to the Super Bowl. It's very straightforward. What is the biggest stat that impacted the Packers in 2024? Was it the drops we talked about? That was important, but it wasn't the biggest stat. Was it the games missed by players due to injury? No, that happens to every team. Was it touchdowns? No. It was the fact that the Green Bay Packers were 1-5 in their division last year. That cannot happen again if the Green Bay Packers are going to make it to the Super Bowl. The road to the Super Bowl runs through the AFC North. The Packers can get to the wild card, and we saw them do that in 2023 and 2024. But the chances of winning a Super Bowl are so much better if you win your division. Winning the division will also show the team belongs in the Super Bowl. This is not a team that sneaks into the playoffs. It is a team that dominates its division and gets into the playoffs because it's the best team in the division. That is where the Packers need to be in 2025. There's no more, we're the youngest team, we snuck into the wild card. It's got to be, we won our division, we got a first round bye, and we're here in the playoffs to win the Super Bowl. This team has to go at least 3-3 in the division, or they are not going to win the division and make it to the Super Bowl. I'm telling you that right now. There's no bigger key for the Green Bay Packers than to win the NFC North. If they win the NFC North this year, it's going to be a situation where they can show they're truly an elite team against quality opponents and get them to the Super Bowl. In the next video, we're going to talk about the top 5 reasons why the Packers can reach the Super Bowl in 2025. We've looked at this from a negative lens with this video, but the next video, which we'll have in a couple days, we'll talk about the ways that the Packers can and should make it to the Super Bowl in 2025. Once again, give us a like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video. And as always, go Pack Go.